We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power word, power word, power word. Social justice, power word, power word, power word.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends on the West, and good in-between time to our friends in the in-between spaces. Welcome, 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 my friends, to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters of the Bide-Weston Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert Seda-Schreiber. I'm the chief activist here at the center and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past over a year now. Over 300 shows coming at you live every weeknight. 300 some odd shows, many of them very odd indeed. We have not missed a night. Can't stop, won't stop, and won't miss a night for the near future and the far future. So make sure you're here with us. Tonight is super special. One of my favorite guests, and I can say that if any other guests have been on the show and watching right now, no offense. Just Dr. Peniel Joseph is someone that is near and dear to my heart, and our journeys are parallel in many reasons. An early guest on the show. In fact, tonight is special for many reasons, one of which is tomorrow is actually the first anniversary of Dr. Peniel Joseph's first appearance on the show. So it's kind of a nice bit of serendipity that he's with us tonight. Tonight we'll be chopping up Biden's first 100 days and talking about so much more. So stay tuned, true believers. Dr. Joseph will be on in just a moment, but since I have so many of you here, because I know that Dr. Joseph brings so many folks to the yard, his friends, his fam, his readers, his students, and everybody else, his colleagues. So thank you all for joining us. Many of you are probably here for the first time. So I do want you to come back. I do want you to know that we are here every weeknight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, live, coming at you. Social Justice Power Hour. And to entice you to come back, just give me a hot minute to tell you who's going to be on the show in the near and far future. Tomorrow night, Minda Harts, the author of the memo, Finding a Place for Women of Color, not only at the table, but at the head of the table. So we're going to have a great conversation tomorrow night. David Brzezinski, it's First Friday folk here at the Power Hour. Make sure you're with us with renowned folk musician David Brzezinski. And then coming up on the Power Hour, David F. Walker, folks, author of so many great graphic novels and comic books, Bitter Root, The Black Panther Party, and the reboot of Power Man and Iron Fist. Surviving the White Gaze, Rebecca Carroll. Cannot wait to talk to Rebecca about her journey. David Camp, this is going to be extraordinary. Emilio Delgado, otherwise known as Luis from Sesame Street, and Bernadette Yao from Zoom is going to join me and David in conversation about his great book, Sunny Days. Changing the Game is a fantastic documentary about transgender athletes in sports. We're going to have one of the folks behind it, Shane Diamond, with us to talk about that. The night before it premieres on Hulu, by the way. Just now confirmed this, Maurice Chammah is going to be with us, the author of Let the Lord Sort Them, The Rise and Fall of the Death Penalty, working for the Marshall Project. Incredibly important conversation, incredibly timely. We're going to have a poetry night with Kalisa Ray, author of Ghost in the Black Girl's Throat. Becoming Dr. Seuss author Brian J. Jones, talking about all that's going on with Seuss right now. No one better than his biographer, Brian J. Jones, going to talk about all that with us and punch me up to the gods. This book is going to blow up, my friends. Do not miss this conversation with author Brian Broom. That's just some of the highlights coming up on the Power Hour. So don't miss an evening, my friends. Don't miss an evening. And speaking of, don't miss, put a rainbow heart on your calendar right now. Virtual Pride 21, June 12th. Don't miss it. If you saw Virtual Pride last year, we had over 10,000 folks come out and march in solidarity, dance in celebration creating virtual community. Billy Porter, Titus Burgess, and so many other folks are going to be with us. So do not miss this, friends. Virtual Pride 21, June 12th. Mark it down, RSVP so we make enough snacks. But tonight, gosh, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time now. Dr. Peniel E. Joseph is founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin. His career focus has been on Black Power studies, which encompasses interdisciplinary fields such as Africana studies, law and society, women's and ethnic studies, and political science. Peniel holds joint professorship appointments at the LBJ, my heart's all aflutter and my synapses are all popping. He holds joint professorship appointments at the LBJ School of Public Affairs as the Barbara Jordan Chair in Ethics and Political Values and in History at the College of Liberal Arts. As a professor at Tufts University, he founded the first center to promote engaged scholarship on race and democracy's impact on global citizens. He's appeared on CNN, National Public Radio, The Colbert Report, PBS, MSNBC, The Social Justice Power Hour, and authored many award-winning books, including Waiting Till the Midnight Hour, A Narrative History of Black Power in America, Dark Days, Bright Nights from Black Power to Barack Obama, and Stokely, A Life, which has been called the definitive biography of Stokely Carmichael. His most recent work is The Sword and the Shield, The Revolutionary Lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. As Peniel his own self says, quote, "So the whole world is absolutely in the throes of a rebellion against this inequality that is organized around anti-Black racism. But it's organized around intersectional injustice based on your race, class, gender, sexuality, how you identify." So you were seeing this, and I think that King and Malcolm actually anticipated this crisis. And that's why they were interested in thinking of human and civil rights as a human rights movement, this bigger movement that was going to guarantee redistribution of wealth and guaranteeing citizenship for, yes, Black people, but for all people. And sentiments like that are just one of the innumerable reasons we are not only proud to have Dr. Joseph as a guest on our Power Hour tonight, but we also have the extraordinary honor of Peniel serving as Vice President of our Abide Wrestling Center for Social Justice Board of Directors. So please join me in welcoming the hardest working man in social justice, Dr. Peniel Joseph, everybody. Peniel, thank you so much, as always, for gracing us with your pleasure, my friend.
Hey, Robert Martin, it's always a pleasure to be with you and to converse and dialogue and build with you.
It's been just an amazing time. As I said at the outset to our folks watching, it is the eve of our anniversary. I'm sorry I didn't get you any flowers. But gosh, you know, you came on the show in our nascent stages. You believed in what we were doing before we got the Wayne Brady's and the Valerie Jarrett's and the Billy Eichner's and all the rest of the folks that have graced our stage since then. You saw something in what we were doing, and I want to thank you for that. It was really important. It was a moment for us that allowed us to move into a different sphere where people understood that we were having meaningful conversations.
No, absolutely. It's my pleasure and my honor. I think the work that the Rustin Center does is so important and integral now more than ever. And it's work that you've been doing, that I've been doing. We've all been, so many of us have been in this space. And over the last 18 months, we've seen how this space has grown in just extraordinary ways. But certainly credit is due to those who, came early and never left, right? So we know that this work was deeply unpopular from Stonewall to the present, from Selma to the present, from Reconstruction to the present, right? And suddenly you've got hashtags and you've got this massive social movement that compels people, and we're experiencing both the highs of that, but also the backlash. When we think about the backlash against critical race theory, when we think about a Tennessee state rep saying the 3/5 compromise was to end slavery. This is important. And one thing I'll start, I want to talk about Biden. We're going to talk about Biden's 100 days, but I think we should know that what's happening is there are really these competing versions of our history that sometimes people call it the culture wars. But the idea that there is no systemic racism, where Tim Scott says that, and sort of Kamala Harris says it too, but for different reasons. I see why she says it in terms of there is a political nature of this. I disagree with the vice president. But the idea that there is no systemic racism, the idea that the 3/5 compromise was always engineered as a secret plan for the founding fathers to end slavery, all of these are lies. And it's part of sort of this redemption narrative, this white supremacist narrative that said that, Reconstruction was bad, slavery was good. It's sort of, sweet tea and mint juleps, Gone with the Wind, Birth of a Nation, that these are positive. And that's when you see the Tom Cottons and the backlash against the 1619 Project. So you're really seeing not only voter suppression bills to try to destroy democracy and suppress the Black vote and other voters of color, but you're seeing this idea of animating the culture wars. The idea, just like political correctness is an invention of really the right wing, this idea of wokeness as something that's negative, the idea that the woke mob, the woke thugs, right? And you've seen different journalists really invoke eugenics all over again. It's a very, very, very dangerous time, even as it's a very uplifting time, because the last year and a half, the last year or so, we've had the biggest public education, in addition to the demonstrations and in addition to reimagining public safety or defund the police, abolish prison, in addition to massive marches and uprisings on behalf of, trans Black women, queer Black folks, and queer folks of color, LGBTQIA. Those are all extraordinary, but we're seeing that backlash, and it's important that backlash always, pivots on three angles. One is economic, the other is political/policy, but the other is culture. This idea of the fear and loathing of people of color, and you can see it with the anti-trans bathroom bills, but also anti-critical race theory. We can see the violence against Asian American, Pacific Islanders, the uptick there, the continued violence against Black people and Black communities, and LGBTQIA communities. So we're really walking and navigating a tightrope during this time period. And it's a very dangerous time, because the massive voter suppression bills that have paralleled Biden's 100 days are really very reminiscent of the Reconstruction period, where right after racial slavery, you see the formation of the Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1866, less than a year after the 13th Amendment is ratified. So we've never been a truly multiracial, inclusive democracy. And you can see the rash of voter suppression bills, which are really just anti-Black racist bills. You can see the raft of bills designed to stop people from having peaceful protest against the police, bills that offer immunity to white supremacists and racial terrorists who drive cars into peaceful demonstrations and kill and murder people. That's what we're up against. And for those of us who are in this struggle, our ancestors were up against it too. This is what happened after racial slavery, and we are facing the new Confederacy in the 21st century. And that's not just the South, like Malcolm X reminds us that anything south of Canada was the U.S. South. So the whole of America is the Confederacy, and it's important for us to remember that.
Yeah, and I think of your perspective on this is so unique and so important, and I think that throughout the year, especially with the George Floyd tipping point, you've been such a source of knowledge, of inspiration, of just keeping us balanced And one of the things I really thought about you a lot was on all the social media. Everyone was talking about on the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination, and everyone was sending out messages and inspirational quotes, and what they always do. And it always strikes me as very difficult because at the time of his death, as you know more than anybody probably, he was the most hated man in America.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And there was no talk of that. There was no talk of that difficulty. And how do we marry the two things? The inspirational man he was, and the fact that he was so hated and so just spat upon, both literally and figuratively, at the time of his death, at the time of his shooting. That he wasn't this grand hero. That's not the way anybody saw him. So how do we find these spaces historically and in the present where we can see things clearly but still be inspired at the same time?
Yeah, I think we have to tell the truth. I mean, Dr. King obviously talked about building the beloved community, was a partner and ally and, a student of and mentor to as well of Bayard Rustin, because they served those roles to each other, student and mentor. Dr. King talked about building a beloved community, but, no less than the Black Panthers, Dr. King was in opposition to police brutality. Dr. King was brutalized by the police and law enforcement, right? So there's a through line when we think about King talking about a revolution of values and the price that the country needed to pay, more than just the price that he paid in terms of being assassinated, but the fact that once King realized the depth and breadth of this monster that we're facing in terms of, just injustice in the United States and globally, and the way the United States fans the flames of that injustice, even as we have people within the United States who are trying to fan the flames of justice, right? So that becomes the dialectic, right? And so King understood that, and that's why he was trying to build a multiracial poor people's campaign at the time of his assassination. I think what's really important for us to do is always hold up and valorize the radical King and the revolutionary King, because that's the King that so many people don't want to touch, but so many people need to hear. And I think the positive is that this year, more people have heard about that version and that vision of King. And I do think the positive of this year, when you see Judas and the Black Messiah, Daniel Kaluuya win an Oscar, when you see One Night in Miami, when you see the Who Killed Malcolm X documentary, there's so much more of an interest in this period right now for obvious reasons, but we can learn so much. And I think that's what should provide us that hope and that inspiration. It's not just words, but it's really deeds as well.
And it's so interesting to me because people will, create this hero out of Dr. King, and neuter him in the process.
Yep.
And at the same time, the Black Panthers will be seen as villains of the peace when they started that incredible free breakfast program. And the majority of their work was about improving the community and especially working with children. And there's so many folks that don't know that aspect.
Yeah. And the thing is that the working with children and the community programs and the buses to prisons and the Jacob Winter's health program and the clinic they set up in Chicago, that's all really important. But with the Panthers, the wider context of the Panthers, and they're borrowing from Malcolm X here, is this resistance to state-sanctioned violence and fascism and authoritarianism and imperialism and white supremacy. So they're real critics of what we might call neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is just, the post-war American liberalism on steroids, which redefines everything as just, and everyone as just property, as something that can be commodified and privatized, punished, incarcerated, and super exploited. And that's why, you talked at the start, Robert Martin, Dr. King talked about redistribution of wealth, because at the end of the day, and I'd love for us to start talking about some of the positives of the Biden administration, but at the end of the day, the biggest game changer is going to be that, just wealth redistribution. And there's multiple ways I think that should be done, including reparations, not just for African American people, but for Native people and for other people as well, to end the wealth gap and the asset gap, and not just an income gap, and not just unemployment insurance and a jobs guarantee. It's different, because the wealth gap is what drives the political and racial inequality and the abuse of poor people and HIV positive teens and trans folks who are being sexually trafficked and assaulted, and Black women's maternal health outcomes. It's all interconnected, but the reason why you can have some people doing billion-dollar schemes to suppress the vote is connected to that wealth gap. So yeah, corporations need to pay more taxes. Yeah, we need a more progressive tax code, but until you have a real redistribution of wealth, and it's not going to just come through the tax code. It's not going to just come through the tax code. So we have larger fish to fry. We have larger goals if we're ever going to achieve equity domestically and globally. So
let's start chopping it up. Let's talk about Biden's 100 days. Now, I was a little I'm trying to think of the right word, reluctant, because I think he's doing a pretty okay job. And when we started talking about you coming on and really giving us your assessment and the historical perspective and what you see as the future of what that all means together, I remember when we first got Valerie Jarrett on the show, and everybody we're like, hey, Valerie Jarrett, how exciting, that's incredible. And then you said, wait a minute, my brother, we have to talk, and this is what you need to talk to her about, this and this and this, and these are the issues, and these were some of the problems with that administration. And you gave me a really strong platform to bring up some meaningful conversation topics that she really appreciated having the chance to discuss. But it was just funny because you kind of put the brakes on it for a moment and allowed me to get through the excitement of it and understand that there were deeper issues that needed to be discussed and processed and addressed. So when we started talking about Biden, I'm like, okay, what's Peniel going to bring to the show?
Well, you know what? I just actually finished talking to a former member of the Obama administration for my podcast that's going to come out next week. The thing is, we have to put this in context. I have, and I've been on record with great admiration for Obama and the Obama administration, but I'm also a critic of the Obama administration, and that's our duty as citizens, let alone as activists. So, when we, beyond the excitement of saying, oh my gosh, it's Valerie Jarrett, you've got to definitely question and challenge and provoke and interrogate an official like that, and somebody who continues to speak and also have civil disagreements with folks like that. I'll start with the good of the Biden administration. The number one thing is this American Family Plan, the Rescue Act, 1.9 trillion. That's the game changer policy wise, and we can then talk about the executive orders, and we can talk about that. But the 1.9 trillion, hugely important. The estimates, and I have them over here, lifting more than 10 million people out of poverty by 2022. 29% reduction in Black poverty, 31% reduction in Latino poverty, 15% reduction Asian American Pacific Islander poverty, and among children, it's estimated to reduce poverty by 47%. This is huge. This is the game changer of the first 100 days, right? And the reason why is when we think about policy, we want policy that's going to impact, and this is redistributive policy. This is redistribute. So the problem with the Trump stimulus when the pandemic first started is that trillions went to corporations who stole that money, and we're never getting that money back, right? So yeah, people got those one-time stimulus checks, and for 6 months, unemployment insurance was good enough where people basically had a living, a universal basic income for a few months there, but then it wasn't extended at that same rate, that $600 a week extra. But Democrats gave away over $1 trillion to get that $600 a week extra for ordinary people. And I understand why they did it, but it's important for us to remember that. So this $1.9 trillion plan is that's been passed by the Democratic Senate. And again, we owe many people for this, but certainly Stacey Abrams and what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia and so many Black women in Georgia to get Reverend Raphael Warnock elected. He's up, just for 2 years, he's up for the 6-year term, 2022. Republicans are targeting that seat in Georgia through voter suppression, and to get our Jewish American brother, John Ossoff, elected alongside of him, right? And so that's extremely important. So that 1.9 trillion is the game changer and the biggest impact that he's going to have so far. I mean, the Jobs Act and these other legislation, if that's passed, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, he basically wants another $4 trillion to be passed over 8 years. Those would be hugely, hugely impactful. But so far in the 100 days, the biggest policy achievement is getting that passed. And again, it shows the complexity of the time we're in, because Biden got 81 million votes. He won the popular vote by almost 4%. And still, the Senate is 50-50. With Kamala Harris, it's 51 as a tiebreaker. And the House is only Democratic by a few seats. And with the new gerrymandering that's going to occur and the new census, places like Texas, where I live, are due to get more representatives and less representation. So more congressional figures, but less representation, because Texas is gerrymandered. So Austin, the city I live in, doesn't even have a congressperson because they've gerrymandered Austin, and we represent large swaths of Republican districts. So they've cut it up in a way where there's over 1 million people here and they have no federal representation, right? So until that ends, we're in deep trouble. So the first 100 days, that has been the biggest. And then again, there's executive orders talking about equity in the federal government, including equity vis-a-vis data. The State Department under Anthony Blinken just hired their first diversity chief with Ambassador, an African-American ambassador, Abercrombie. So there's so much, Gina Abercrombie, there's so much progress going on there in terms of at the federal level. USAID, our international aid, Samantha Power is there, who was part of the Obama administration, and UN ambassador. Cass Sunstein is at the Department of Homeland Security. So there's positives there. The Justice Department, Merrick Garland, and the big figure there is Vanita Gupta. There's not really a person better to be the U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the country than Vanita Gupta, who cares about mass incarceration, who cares about issues of racial justice, who cares about LGBTQIA, who cares about these issues that are so profoundly important to this time. So when we think about the positives, there are many positives, and then we can chop it up on the work that needs to be done. But the positives are many. And the statements that the vice president and the president made in the context of the Derek Chauvin trial were very positive too. The statements about systemic racism that continue the statements that President Biden said at his inauguration, first American president to use the words white supremacy during his inauguration. So no, the first 100 days, obviously they've been imperfect. How could they be perfect? But it's been a very, very strong first 100 days.
I see Biden, and I wonder your thoughts on this, as a figure who's always evolving. Even in his later years, he's later in his journey than the two of us. But he's still learning. He's still evolving. I mean, even his language on racial justice. There were times in the debates where it was almost cringeworthy, some of the things that he was saying. And he was doing verbal gymnastics to try to satisfy, the liberal left and folks who didn't want to hear defund the police or anything against the police. So there was this balance he was trying to create, during the campaign. But even after that, there was a town hall he did on CNN after he was elected, where he was still using some of that language that was really troublesome. But he seems to have listened to good advice, learned from good people, and I truly believe he has a good heart and he wants to do and know better. And I was wondering your perspective on that growth of him as a candidate, as a president, and really, honestly, as a person.
Yeah, I think we have to always remember that, politicians are beholden to politics, which is why we call them politicians. So I think when you look at Bill Clinton's neoliberalism and his politics of triangulation, it's morally reprehensible and politically indefensible, but I understand it if you're going to be that kind of politician, right? So most politicians do not have personal sincerity and political integrity and unapologetic love for the human race, right? Those are usually social activists and organizers. That's why we do what we do. We don't have to run and make those kind of deals. That's why I always say this is sort of the purest form of politics, because we're not beholden to anybody. I think about Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture in Lowndes County, Alabama, versus what happened to him by the time he's in Guinea. And it's more politics, So once you're beholden to some kind of state or some kind of figure, you're doing all kinds of compromises, right? So the positive for us with Biden is that the movement and the movement is the Black Lives Matter movement, alongside of LGBTQIA, alongside of the Moral Mondays, alongside of trans rights, alongside of Me Too, alongside of March for Our Lives and DACA and Muslim marches. So that movement, and we put it under the broad aegis of BLM. The movement made Biden. Okay, that's what we have to understand. The movement made Biden, because without that movement that organized 81 million people for him to become president, strategically to get to 270, to defeat white supremacy in Georgia in that election cycle, to defeat white supremacy in Wisconsin and Michigan, right, in that election cycle, we would be having a much different conversation today, right? And so once you're a part of a movement, because remember, these movements transformed Abraham Lincoln, they transformed John Kennedy, they transformed Lyndon Johnson, right? The Great Depression and the Second World War transformed FDR, right? When we think about Bayard Rustin was transformed by war as a conscientious objector and by visiting India. These are transformative, if he hadn't visited, he's not the same. Okay. And so when we think about Biden, this movement has transformed him. And I think that, his language sounds better. He feels comfortable. I think people had been saying after he was elected, he was going to be a transitional figure. And we're seeing him really now more as a transformational figure, right? I think that the danger is everywhere in this sense. When you think about Roosevelt and Roosevelt's 100 days, or LBJ's first 100 days, in his first term, not the first 100 days after the Kennedy assassination, the difference is you have to really go back to the 19th century, when in this case it was the Democratic Party, because the parties have realigned after the Civil Rights Movement, to have one major party that is committed to white supremacy and authoritarian fascism, and so to have that exist in 2021 is truly extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous, right? Because what the Republican Party is setting up for 2022 and 2024 is a win at all cost strategy. They are cheating, they are threatening, they are harassing, they are expelling people in their own party. It's very similar to the Soviet Union. The Republican Party of the 1950s that were cold warriors and very harsh against communism have taken a page out of that notion of democratic centralism, and you just toe the party line. When you're in a democracy, it is so rare to be like, wow, you can get 50 senators to do exactly what you want, let alone hundreds of representatives to vote how you want. They're the only party that can do it because it's not a party. Okay, so part of the diversity of the Democratic Party, people are always saying it's their weakness. And no, it's a strength to have AOC in the same party as Connor Lamb, and to have Joe Manchin in the same party as Chuck Schumer or Sherrod Brown. It's the strength, actually, or Bernie Sanders, because what it means is that you all aren't controlled by some kind of groupthink, right? Like how could you ever get 50 people to agree on something without threats, right? And when it comes to the Republican Party right now, if they don't toe the line with Trumpism and MAGA, and you see what's happening with Liz Cheney, and Liz Cheney is losing her leadership spot there because she's saying, hey, the election wasn't a fraud. So there's so much danger happening here. And we know about white supremacy and the white supremacist connection with law enforcement, with the military. So we're in trouble. We're in trouble because they're trying to make sure that no Democrat can ever win the White House again, no matter how much they win the popular vote by. And you're seeing it with these voter suppression bills in Georgia. The Supreme Court is lost right now. The Supreme Court is lost because of what they did to Merrick Garland. And they stole Merrick Garland's seat, and then they added Amy Coney Barrett as well. So this is we're in real trouble. So it's positive what Biden is doing, but it's the landscape. It's very hard for democracy to flourish and thrive in this landscape, and that's how the Republicans want it, because they know they can't win in any kind of fair fight, including in the state of Texas, the entire South. But these voter suppression, these voter repression bills are very, very chilling. And these anti-police protest bills are very, very chilling. These bills that are attacking critical race theory to try to foment more white supremacist violence against folks are very, very chilling. And really the continued assaults by police and the continued murder of Black people by police is also very chilling because it continues. Post Derek Chauvin, we've seen in North Carolina and other spaces and places, police continue to kill and murder Black people. So we're in trouble. We have to be very, very vigilant and continue to fight.
So one of the things that you mentioned was you see this strength and diversity of the Democratic Party. Now, historically, that hasn't been the case when it comes to moving forward. I mean, as well as philosophically, even spiritually, that diversity is something that we cherish, that we brings us great hope. But it hasn't always helped us in elections and passing laws and passing bills and seeing the justice done on a greater scale. But now we're seeing that, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the difference? Why is that diversity now not only a spiritual and a philosophical strength for us, but also finally seems to be a political strength as well?
I think it's the demographic changes, Robert Martin, and the fact that we've been able to galvanize and motivate so many people to go to the polls. Black women are the best voters of the Democratic Party, but they're now being more represented when you think about Ayanna Pressley and Cori Bush, when you think about Val Demings, you think about so many different Kamala Harris. They're now being represented more in Congress and more in state and local legislations. But they're also, when we look at Vanita Gupta and Black women, Vanita is Indian, South Asian of color, they're also being better represented along the supply chain of federal and state and local governments. And by that, I mean that you can work for the Justice Department. You can be part of the chief of staff. You can even be somebody who just interns at the White House, right? So part of it is that we've seen this coalition of voters grow as Democrats have lost the white vote. The Republican Party is a virtually all white party, and again, it's very similar to how the historic late 19th century Democratic Party was, which was just a white, at that point, women couldn't vote. So it was just a white male party, basically. And so I think the interesting part of both the Obama coalition, but then the Biden coalition is how racially diverse, and Biden's administration has been really the most racially diverse in history. And they're really making sure to think equity in everything, equity in terms of wealth, equity in terms of the environment, equity in terms of policy, equity in terms of data and housing. And that's the only way we can move forward. But even if you do all of that, like I said at the start, you're going to need some kind of reparative infusion of wealth for communities of color who have been historically disadvantaged and whose labor has built this country. And that's, that's on a number, the federal government can do a number of different things to incentivize the private sector. Right now, McKinsey came out with a report where it would take 95 years for Black folks to have private sector parity based on their population. They're 12% of the country. And people talk about, well, could we do it in 25 years? But even if you got more access to venture capital and private equity and hedge funds, a city like Austin is predicted to make more wealth in the next decade or two than any other city in the country. That's still not going to be enough. Now, it would be amazing if you can say Black and Latinx and others are going to be represented in not just Wall Street, but in Silicon Hills here, Silicon Beach in LA, Silicon Valley in San Francisco, based on their demography, because that means they would have, for Black people, 12% of the jobs, 12% of the wealth that it's going to produce. That would be amazing, but you'd still need assistance from the federal government too. So it's really a top-down, bottom-up strategy that you're trying to achieve real transformation in this coming generation.
And what do you think is more of a third rail? The uplifting of Black, Indigenous people of color, or the trying to find income equality and the raising up of poor people? Which one do you think is really more dangerous for Biden to pursue? And
well, he has to pursue them both simultaneously. But I would say, when it's emphasized that you're helping Black people, it's always more dangerous. But I think the positive of what Biden is doing is that you have to emphasize it, and have to emphasize that you're helping people of color, because the idea that, a rising tide lifts all ships in a racist society is a joke. The idea that a rising tide lifts all ships in a queer-phobic society, in a transphobic society, is a joke. Because when you have those kinds of oppression, what it means is that the society has enacted violence against those people, and there's a carve-out to oppress those people. So unless you specifically focus and give those people, yes, special attention, right, it's going to continue, right? And that includes gender too, right? Right now, unless you get paid family leave, and there's 12-week extension on the table, and women really deserve a year, and the primary child caregiver deserves a year. Women are constantly out of luck, and even saying, hey, equity and a man gets the same leave time is really problematic unless you talk about it's a same-sex couple, because all the data shows us that women continue to do more of the housework, more of the child care, more of the educational care. For those of us who were raised by single moms like myself, I can absolutely say that was the truth. Where it's like, did my mom do more of the child care, more for me and my brother? Yes. She was alone by herself. Yes. Okay. So I'm living proof. So what women disproportionately, and Black women disproportionately, had households living below the poverty line and right above the poverty line, Black and Latinx women, right? And of course, some white women do too. So the only thing he can do is what he's doing, is that you say you want these big changes and transformations, and you're going to have equity connected to the policy. Now, what's interesting, Robert Martin, and this goes back to the whole filibuster as racist, right? And historically, the filibuster has been this racist, white supremacist tool used by Southern Congress folks to prevent the passage of legislation, especially vis-a-vis racial justice legislation, right? Throughout the 20th century and the 21st century. What you're seeing now that Biden is committed to racial equity and intersectional justice, they're saying the Republicans don't want to spend any money, okay? You see, because when we think about the past, even the Great Society and the New Deal, those things were spent on the terms of the white supremacists, right? That's how they were spent. So Black people and other people could be carved out of those deals, right? Agricultural Adjustment Act. That's why this new bill, one thing I didn't say, had $5 billion for Black farmers. And Black farmers have lost millions of acres of land. They used to be over 15% of the farmers in the country. They're less than 2% now. They've had their land stolen. That's a reparations piece right there. Beyond racial slavery is all the land that was stolen after racial slavery. And at times we have documented evidence of Black people whose land was just ripped off by white people in the 19th and the 20th century with no papers, just lies, and the courts and the violence ensured that it happened, right? So all that has to be, transformed. But at the very moment, you've got a president and a movement that is saying this time it's going to be different. That's when Republicans and white supremacists are saying, let's stop the checks. Because remember, it's all lies about fiscal responsibility, because when the pandemic hit, they stole trillions of dollars and gave it to big business. They stole trillions of dollars and gave it to big business. And regular people got $600 unemployment checks and $1,400 one-time checks, right? Yes.
So then what is the movement forward for us?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do. I mean, the idea of at the federal level, reimagining public safety, where we take away most police powers from the police, in the sense that policing right now involves connecting to with homeless people. It involves criminalizing our student population. It involves surveilling housing projects. It involves coming to neighborhood disturbances that could be handled in nonviolent ways. Police shouldn't be interacting with motorists, which is why Dante Wright was murdered. People with guns should just not be on the march interacting with us every day. Why? Why is that? Why is that happening? It goes back to slave patrols. Police were first institutionalized as slave patrols during racial slavery, and after Reconstruction, they're institutionalized vis-a-vis as guardians of a white supremacist color line. That's what we have to think about. Police and justices of the peace and sheriffs. There's going to be a small moment in the 1860s and 1870s where in majority Black counties, in places like Mississippi and South Carolina, you actually have Black folks who are elected at the local level in those positions, but those folks are going to be routed and wiped out by the Klan. And the Klan is just a loosely organized network of white supremacists that are going to include former Confederate military generals and colonels and militia. It's going to include business and civic leaders, religious leaders, right? And so when we think about how we got to this point with the police are connected to the shotgun policy of Mississippi, the racist pogroms that happened in Texas, Louisiana, in New Orleans. Thousands and thousands of Black people were murdered in the streets in broad daylight and at night. Remember, there were no burning crosses because the burning crosses are from the 1915 D.W. Griffith Birth of a Nation. Right, he burned the cross, and then the Klan started to use it. Okay, the re-energized Klan. So, Martin Luther King Jr. said that America was a society sick with the cancer of racism, but he didn't start the disease. He just diagnosed it like a physician, like a doctor. Right. So the thing we have to move forward is really going beyond, yes, it'd be great to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We definitely need the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need the infrastructure bills that Biden is suggesting. But even beyond that, we have to, in order to build the beloved community, we have to reimagine violence in this country and policing in this country and poverty and homelessness and mental health in this country. And the only way you can do it is by talking about people of color, because they disproportionately are impacted by all those things, right? And so, and we know, if you read Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, that white folks are not interested in their own economic interest. They're interested in racism and white privilege and white supremacy. They will consistently vote against their economic interest in order to defend a perceived racial interest. Okay, so the whole idea of like we're all going to get together, black, white, and the MAGA folks were concerned about their pocketbooks. They're not. The MAGA folks are racist. Okay, and again, we can say it. We can say it. And so the big lie of racism is always denial, 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 which is why you have people lying about the 3/5 compromise, lying about Reconstruction, lying about racial slavery, saying 1619 didn't happen, inventing a 1776 commission. So you might as well say the founders were feminists too, right, Robert Morton? The founders were feminists. They were anti-racist. They were just awesome. And we've invented these problems. It's the black folks the founders loved trans people. They loved queer folks. Thomas Jefferson was writing letters about his lover. It wasn't just Sally Hemings. He had other stuff. He was writing about Sam, right? It's not just Sally, but he was writing about Sam. So we're outing all the founders. They were queer, anti-racist radicals. And they want us to believe that, right? That's where we're at. So we have to build that beloved community by going beyond just, and again, the president's not going to be the person who saves us. We have to save us, because this president wouldn't be in office without us.
Right. So that's all wonderful. Can we talk concrete? Can we talk direct? How do we, if they're going to lie, if they're just going to spew lies, and that's going to be, and obviously that's what's going to happen for however long we're able to have this bit of power, this bit of a moment where we are coming together. How do you combat that? How do you battle that? How do you overcome that?
Oh yeah, and people are doing it right now at the local level. I mean, one, the resistance is about organizing, educating, and agitating along a number of different lines. I mean, at the local level, people are committed to not just anti-racist education, but centering racial justice, centering Black history, centering LGBTQIA history, Asian American history. It's Asian American History Month right now, Asian American Pacific Islander Month right now, centering a history of resistance against racial and gender and class and oppression, right? So centering a history of intersectional justice. In terms of a specific, policies, it really depends on where you're at. Right here in Austin, we've just had different propositions that were on the ballot, including a homeless proposition that has recriminalized homelessness. At the same time, we've had some progressive things passed, and there was a new report about reimagining public safety with community and city, and has a whole outline of what policing should look like in the future, including the budget, investing in the poorest communities here in Austin, and partnering with the city in nonviolent ways to create a revolution of values. I think that's happening in cities across the country. And so wherever you're at, I would suggest people getting in on that, like getting in on movements for social justice and social change. Now, at the federal level, of course, we should vote in 2022. Anything people can do to organize and help with that. But I think all politics are local. So wherever you're at, you should be very, very focused. And then, in your own just network, if you're part of a neighborhood association, if you're part of a church group, a synagogue, a mosque. Obviously, if you're in New Jersey, if you're, the Bayard Rustin Social Justice Center, you should be a part of that. You should donate. You should leverage your voice. So I think the positive is that people are doing it en masse. I think the negative is that there are a lot of forces built in that make our job really, really harder. I would suggest everybody read Ari Berman, the work he's doing in Mother Jones about the Electoral College, about the Senate, about gerrymandering, and how it's so hard for the will of the majority of the American people right now to actually be heard at the national and federal level, but also at the state and local levels because of gerrymandering. So I would say that we educate, agitate, we organize where we are at locally, and we try to ensure that we're impacting a supply chain of power and privilege on behalf of others, that we're amplifying people's voices. Yes, use social media, but also now that for those who are vaccinated, we're going to be in person and be able to be in touch with people. Go in person, go to meetings, go to your church, mosque, synagogue, or local community center, and make your voice be heard. And certainly reading and educating yourself about all these issues is always imperative.
That's a beautiful sentiment to close us out. And the last thing is this, that our greatest strength right now is this recognition of intersectionality, is this recognition of that we all can finally come together, and we talked about this when you were on the show previously, the fact that Black Lives Matter also incorporated Black Trans Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And there was that huge rally that was organized by a few folks, including Raquel Willis in Brooklyn,
Yes.
where they expected a few hundred and got tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, yeah.
Right. And so how do we do that? That's our last thought of the night. How can we keep it in our minds, remember that we only do this when we're together?
Yeah, I think that we're doing it. I think that the very fact that, Black Lives Matter has made the idea of intersectionality that Kimberly Crenshaw and Black feminism had always been preaching and had been organizing around, for decades, has made that go global is hugely important. And I think that the positive of what we talked about today, the 100 days of Biden, is that you can have policies that are going to impact all of us, but that are going to center equity, because all these policies are going to impact all of us differently based on our identity and based on our access to privilege, wealth, racial privilege, gender privilege, sexual orientation privilege, the whole gamut, mental health, able-bodiedness. So we have to always remember that we're part of a universal struggle, but the universal struggle is through the particular struggle of specific groups of people that it's on us to identify with. And in my case, it's the Black Lives Matter movement and Black folks and Black queer and trans and straight and the whole nine. But I also identify with Asian American and Latinx, and I also identify with South Asian folks who are fighting this good fight. So we have to understand that the universal is not just Shakespeare and Thomas Jefferson. It can be a queer a Black kid from Minnesota, Minneapolis, right? And you identify with that person's story, right? Because there's something universal in that story. And we've been fooled into thinking that unless it's white and straight and sort of patriarchal, that's universal, right? It's not universal, right? So indigeneity is universal, queerness is universal, right? So we have to get that through our heads. And I think that this is our time, because all these issues have never been so brilliantly articulated on a mass scale in American and world history.
Thank you, my friend. You are an inspiration to all of us. Your voice has been such a stalwart and strong one this past year, and I look forward to a long, long journey ahead together. I know you have to run.
Yeah, thank you, Robert Martin.
My friend, you be well. Best to your family.
Take care.
So everybody, that is our good friend, Dr. Peniel Joseph, author, activist, Black Power scholar. This is one of his books, his latest book, The Sword and the Shield, The Revolutionary Lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. You can purchase it right now. I want to thank Haley, who's been in the comments section all night, taking over for Chris for the evening. Chris had a bit of a family emergency, so our local community, our friends here, send strength and solace to Chris. And thank you, Haley, for subbing in tonight. And look for that that little bit of a link to get this book from our bookshop.org. All the Power Hour authors who've been in the show are on that list, and there's a bunch of wonderful books that you can find there. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Remember, these wonderful conversations with incredible, extraordinary folks like Dr. Peniel Joseph are all extraordinary only because you extraordinary folks join us and create extraordinary community, building toward, as Peniel said, that beloved community that Dr. King imagined, and that we can see it on the horizon. And these conversations allow us to take part and move forward in that journey together, my friends. So we'll see you here tomorrow night at the Power Hour. We're here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single weeknight live coming at you. Always an empowering, entertaining, fabulous, and meaningful conversation. And please do join us. Until tomorrow night, my friends, much love and respect. Be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most especially these days, please, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power word, power word, power word. Social justice, power word, power word, power word.
Hey, Robert Martin, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So can I tell you, we're close enough now, and I'll share this with the audience too. When you call me Robert Martin, it's literally one of my new favorite thing in the world. I love that. For those of you who don't know, I shared with Peniel that my name, Robert, is in honor of Robert Kennedy, and my middle name is Martin Luther King, because my parents were very, very wonderful people. And I carry that honor every day in the work I do. And Peniel, you're the only one that has come to call me Robert Martin, and I truly dig it the most. So thank you, my friend.
Oh, no problem. It's an extraordinary name, man. It's a great name.
So